Dear colleagues, hello everybody. Today we are going to have a seminar with a discussion of exploring communities of teacher education researchers, bibliometric study. And today Denis Ananin will tell us, will present this report. Denis, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Aruna. Thank you so much for invitation and the interest for the topic of the visitors of the seminar. Well, a few words. Well, I just start to share my screen and okay. Okay, it works. Well, let me start with to introduce myself. I'm Denis Ananin, research fellow in the Moscow City University. But the study which I will represent, I have conducted in the Center of Institutional Studies in HEC. Originally, I come from teacher education field, teacher training field, that's and in the Center for Institutional Studies, I got an opportunity to study this field from the view of metadata by bibliometric analysis and have revealed my interest for the topic. And then once I came to your laboratory announcement, it was seminars in different tools. I have shown interest, and now I'm landed with my topic in your seminar, and I'm pretty happy about it. Well, to represent my motivation, it's not only the representation of my results of the working paper of our study, but also I will be very glad about your feedback and ideas and research questions which I formed based on the findings I've got from this study. Well, I reveal my interest to the research community of teacher education researchers, and as announced, I will start with the study which with the previous study probably, and it was dedicated to the analysis of teacher education research field in general. We have interested in general features and amount of this in representation of this field in the international journals and some other general characteristics. And you see that afterwards I will speak about the ongoing study. It's even communities of teacher education researchers, and well, my presentation will be invented. That means I will start with the results and will came to the research question and hypothesis to the end. Well, when I start to see the literature about the teacher education research as a separate community, the field of study, I have found out that researchers have denoted it as an emerging field.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Denis, is it okay that we still see the first slide?
I came to the second already.
Oh, sorry, we don't see it. At least I don't see it.
I will try again. Daria, do you see the third slide?
Yes, now I still see the first slide.
The next one?
I see only the first slide.
Wow.
Yeah, now it's the third one.
Now the third.
Can you see the fourth slide?
No, only the third one.
Oh, sorry. Well, I try to share my PDF file. Oops. Well, it's okay if I will.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And I have found out that the field was pretty criticized because of lacks of methodological things, because the field borrows so much from psychology and sociology methods. And as a research field, it was really quite skeptical. And some other features which I found out that researchers point out about the studies on teacher education are small scale. That means that the study was based on the private practice which teacher used in school and describe it. That was one point, and the other one feature is that these studies are nation-based. You know, teacher education is focused on the school system of the corresponding country, and that's why it means that researchers are also focusing on the problems which are inside of the country, which or inside of which are relevant for the region, not from the globe world. And okay, coming. No. Okay, I have missed one slide. And the research question which we put in the study, well, I have very good supervision from Andrei Lovakov, who has given very good suggestions regarding the methodology and instrumental suggestion for the study. And by building the research question, we just wanted to see how representative is this field in these international journals and publications. Well, what extent of teacher education research is globally, and what are the determinants of the structure? Well, I have thought to do it more visual, the presentation. That's why I thought about it would be good if you can imagine if you see a cake and you just think and you don't know what is inside, what are ingredients, and you think about how it was produced, who was producer, and the same was for me. I just was interested who are contributors, what topics, and what amount, what extent in general is mean under the teacher education research field? Well, just remember this image. I will come to add to the to the same image. Well, using we have used bibliometric analysis as announced. We took the publications from the Scopus database. We took only article and reviews, which were formal limitations. And we conducted the search query by terms teacher education, teacher preparation, teacher training, teacher educating teacher, pre-service teacher, and teacher educator. Well, we just took the synonymous constructions of our topic and added by two insiders of the process that are pre-service teacher and teacher educators. We have no limitation by the year. Well, the last year we have chosen 2008 because we want to have a complete data set. It can be possible that the years 2018, 2020 could be added by papers, and we just wanted a complete data set. Well, we have excluded journals from the bills list, so it's the predatory journals. And we have got a total amount of publications, more than 24,000. As instrumental tool, we have chosen was viewer, and we have conducted co-author analysis by countries, co-citation by journals, and co-occurrence analysis by titles of documents, or titles of papers. And well, coming to the slowly to the results, just show the dynamics of the total publication output. We see here that from the year 2004 we have a drastic increase of publication. Well, I suppose it's not new, but it corresponds very good to the previous study that the field was established at about the end of last century. Well, and have expanding rates in the new century. Fine, and in the results I will present today only result which concern, which refer to our main idea. It's the community of scholars on teacher education, and to understand or to identify this community, we look in the cluster of journals. Well, the idea was to see the co-citation of journals, and these clusters could represent a community or sub-community of teacher education researchers. Well, the next point was to see the main topics or main research lines, how we announced it. We thought also that if we are busy, if we deal with a topic, and this topic should then is included in some subject area or subfield, and communities form appear about within this subject field, subject area. And the third factor we have chosen, it is international collaborations, which can be also a factor of developing scholars communities. First, we will look in subject area of journals which are publishing these papers from our data set. Well, here also not surprising results. More than 90% it was social sciences, but also contributed by art and humanities, psychology, medicine. Really was it was significant or visible part of data set which by preparing teachers in different medicine subjects, for example, computer science, mathematics, and the less insignificant. Well, unfortunately, we cannot see the precise information about social sciences here. That's why we go further. Well, the first results, it is co-citation of the most cited teacher education journals. What we can see, first of all, we see, oh, sorry. We see this red cluster and blue cluster. And these two clusters are dominated by definite journals, Journal of Teacher Education and Teaching and Teacher Education. These journals represent North American and European journals clusters. These two journals are the most contributors of papers which we get in our data set. And but the interesting thing that even this differentiation factor is a geographical one. That well, in the red cluster we have in the red cluster we have European journals mostly, and in the blue cluster North American, US, Canadian journals. The other cluster represents definite teaching subject. For example, here yellow cluster mathematics, science and mathematics. Here we have information technologies. We see computer and education and so on. The other cluster is this sky blue English as foreign language. A very small cluster of music teacher education. This green cluster represents mostly journals with psychological focus. And within this red cluster, we have here on the left side journals of physical education, sports, 3 journals. Well, the most interesting for me was that these results represent 2 differentiation factors for clustering of, let's say, publishing communities: North American, European, and some teaching subjects. Okay, let's come to the next part of results. It is a topical structure. Well, to define topical structure, as I said, we have conducted co-occurrence analysis of titles of papers, and we see here also main clusters or main topics groups which can also be represented by teacher education sub-communities. This red cluster represents, we see the main terms: challenge, pedagogy, theory. It is mostly represent these general issues of teacher training. The yellow cluster, we see here some names of countries: Ireland, New Zealand, Scotland, Wales, Germany. And here, teacher education reform represents, we have identified it as a comparative studies in teacher education programs and systems. Well, this big green cluster, it represents the teaching profession itself, you see, and this psychological aspect. We see here efficiency, ability, effects, some other terms. Well, quite interesting as well. It's the represented this blue cluster science, which we identified for science in general, and science means science studies, science as a teaching subject. A small cluster represents is represented by communication technologies and information technologies as well. And also more interesting, it is a cluster which represents inclusive education, represented here by terms child, parent, disability, inclusion here, pupil. Well, these are topical clusters which we have. Okay, now we're coming to the co-authorship map of the countries. Here the cluster also represents the historical roots of countries' interactions. First of all, we see the main contributor to the field. It is the US and the UK and Australia. And these three key countries, they are centers of three different clusters. But it's interesting that in the US cluster, we see the former Soviet countries: Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Lithuania. Turkey belongs also to the cluster. The UK cluster focuses on the African countries, which we connect to this colonialism and time, and the development of educational system in the and influence of British system and support on education in African countries. Australia represents the cluster which includes New Zealand, China, Southeast Asia. A separate cluster is Iberic countries, Portuguese and Spanish-speaking countries, which we see here in the left corner, blue cluster. Regarding Europe, we have two clusters. One is represented by Germany and one by Finland. This green and sky blue cluster. add a row of Arabian countries as well. We have here in the top of the structure. Well, based on this analysis of the co-authorship, we see very distinct that collaboration are embedded in the historical or cultural development of countries and language. Well, I have summarized here the summing up the results of these three figures. Well, the main idea for us that the scholars they can build communities within subject areas, and this subject refer mostly to the teaching subject in schools. Well, let's imagine that let's say didactics in chemistry and differs than the didactics in foreign languages, and here we see very distinct differentiation. And regarding the topics, we also see these main research lines which differentiate not only content of the study, but also the methodology. There are special topics which are studied by case studies, for example. Then we have comparative studies, qualitative or quantitative, and this methodological variety, they differs also over these represented clusters or groups of scholars. And also in collaboration on international level, we see very distinct distinct features of it. That's the results which we got from our study. And I'm coming to new research questions, new horizons of the ongoing study. Yeah, as I already told, we see the collaboration within subject areas, national or international collaborations, or even topics. I understand that to identify the community or to describe the community of scholars, maybe it's not very simple to study it in not one dimension, but maybe in 2 or 3 dimensions, because it's not simple to identify that a person say belongs only to one community which interacts in a special way with other communities. We can have a representative of which can belong to different communities, and they have different collaboration patterns. Well, this is the challenge what I'm working on now. And well, regarding the studies about the teacher education or comparative studies on teacher education, I just show you the figure of Greg, which has studied teacher education programs and compare it. And she noticed also the similarities, not of the country, but let's say the regional features, which can be relevant for special region, North American, European, former Soviet Union, China is specific, South America, so on. Well, I would like to just to stress that the international collaborations are also very important for influencing factor. Well, in this regard, the the research question I would say for our discussion, and by preparing the presentation, I understand that the main the main difficulty is to formulate the research question. Probably it's simple. What are the teacher education researcher sub-communities build a global community, and if it is right to say we have a global teacher community, or it is just a common term which describe many national communities or communities within subject areas. Well, and I just have, and I would like to hear also your opinion about it. Also very interested. And I just thought about possible ways or hypotheses how scholars can collaborate. Yeah, for example, they can collaborate within one subject area, let's say mathematics, on a national level. That means that they have a special community on the national level, and within teaching mathematics or mathematics teaching methods. The other case that scholars collaborate within teaching subject area on national and international level. And let's say that association of mathematics teacher educators is more significant than national communities, for example. And the other case can be also that scholars do not form sub-communities at all, and they contribute to the research field by different topics. Let's okay, I can say I can write topics to foreign language teaching methods, but also I'm interested in comparative studies, for example. Well, I sorry, I a bit chaotic, but really by preparing the presentation, and for myself, I could not define itself the research question very precise. Well, coming to our cake, if we now we know the amount of cake and know what does it consist of, but what structure inside we don't we still don't know. It can be a structure as on the first and the second photo here, that it is very complicated and isolated. In the third picture, we see the structure is homogeneous, and we could not identify any bodies inside. Or we have this multi-layer structure. Let's say one layer is one topic, and a piece of a cake is a national case. That means that in every nation, the scholars just studied the same topics or the same subject areas. And if we imagine our cake or our community of teacher education scholars, it can be maybe only ideal, this left image, and very different, and consist of different types of different cakes and the species which form only which form only a relative unity of or a relative community of teacher education scholars. Okay, and you see maybe why it is important in general to study it. For myself, I understand that it is interesting for scholars itself to develop research strategies, publication strategies which are very important now. Well, these results are very important also for science managers who plan the head of laboratory, let's say, for example, head of laboratories and institutions who plan the collaboration or development of research on the other level. And of course, for policymakers, for funding organizations who just would like to support research on teacher education on national level or international level. It depends. It's also important to understand how it works and how it exists, looks inside. Okay, I'm done with my presentation. Would be very glad to your questions and to respond to your questions, and also just your ideas about the studying the community, the scholars community in general, or teacher education scholars community in particular. Thanks so much.
Denis, thank you for your presentation. We have one question in the chat. Did you use the keyword learning as well, not just education?
Not only. Well, thank you for a question. Really good. You know, it was what was my first bibliometric study, and we have a quite long first preliminary stage. First stage. I just took keywords from the most representative papers and just collected, and then we see which are the most representative for these papers. And learning, it's too wide. I mean, if you would use these words, we just take also paper which on education, yes, on one side, but only relative would refer to teacher education. Yes, yeah. Well, we understand, yes, this educational subject area is quite wide, and inside of it is teacher education as our field. Well, we have a question in the chat. Oh, Vladimir, would you?
Anushka is first.
Okay. When you analyze the collaboration between countries, have you considered the different sides of countries by normalization of the network? Unfortunately not. We don't use this option. As I said, it was like general input, general try in this. But thank you for advice. I suppose it's we can use it on our study.
If I can, I have some comments.
Yeah.
I joined the seminar a bit later, so I missed the first part, but I have comments on the presentation of the results. So you have the results for that 3 pictures of different clusterings. One, it's a kind of a presentation, but if you have a quite dense network, and if you are using the traditional visualization using graphs, it turns out that such a visualization is not very readable. Mm-hmm. And you usually want to get some readable picture. So what are other options that you can use? The first one is to use, instead of the traditional graph visualization, by a matrix. So you visualize the data by the corresponding matrix, and there you can take into account also the clustering. So you reorder the nodes according to the clustering. And usually then this will produce some pattern inside the matrix. You will get dense parts and less dense parts. So just looking to the matrix, you will understand much better the internal structure of the network. This is the first thing. Now, when you have a clustering, you can always do so-called block modeling. What you do, you essentially shrink each cluster into a single node, and you produce an overall picture how the clusters are interlinked. Now, the problem in your case is how to define now the weights on the links. You have to think about this, but you will get again quite a nice picture. You see how different clusters are connected. And also, one possibility is simply, for instance, that you compute the average strength, but there are other options. And in this sense, you also see how much these different clusters are interacting. And you can also compute the weight on the loop, so you can see how strong is interaction inside the cluster. So this would be another option. So you to try to produce a kind of block model. And the third option is, which I'm using last years quite a lot, is to produce a kind of backbone or skeleton of the network. So you remove the less important links and you preserve only the strongest links. Here again, you have several options. One is to use so-called pathfinder. Another, a very simple option is, for instance, that you determine for each node 2 closest nodes. So from each node, you identify 2 nodes that are the closest. And in this way, you get the network of the strongest 2 neighbors. And usually this network is quite simple, but it provides a kind of essential structure of the basic network, but it's very readable. So this was about these visualizations of the results. And the other comment is about the question you mentioned towards the end. That was about comparing different clusters. I think that what you can do is you can determine for each cluster the distribution of the corresponding keywords. And then you can compare these distributions. And you will see whether two clusters are dealing about the same topic, or what are essentially the topics that are characteristic for the clusters, and what are the difference between one cluster and the other one on the base of topics. So thank you.
Vladimir, thank you so much. the advice which I would follow, sure. And yeah, about the visualization, it was even my motivation to contact the laboratory, and through Daria. Also looked for these seminars in PAEC, and we'll follow. Even using, I can say that even using this WOS viewer tool, I see that there are also options, but they are not very simple. I just took the most cited or most co-occurrence and so on, just limited to the most representative. And well, regarding this, your last suggestion, I suppose, yeah, it makes sense definitely, and we will try. I suppose a help once would be glad to represent the data I have in one of the seminars here. Well, regarding the visualizations, yes, I should yes, improve it. Well, I can only say that here we have an idea only. No, the main idea to see what cluster itself. I mean, how many clusters and what they represent. But it's really interesting, the inner connections of nodes, and we can use it to national level or to topics and so on. But thank you so much.
Okay, I can probably follow the comments that Vlado has just made. So it's when we were studying the patterns of the structures of citation between the journals in another field, but it doesn't matter. But it's interesting to see that sometimes there is a kind of hierarchical structure. So there are journals which are cited by other journals, and they are not citing them back. So it's kind of interesting to see such cases and to try to explain why it is like that. Because for example, in our field that we were studying social network analysis, there are some journals in sociology, like American Journal of Sociology or something like this, which are cited a lot, but they're not citing back, for example, social networks, because these journals are this is a kind of basis for theories and for methodologies in general. And they might be not so much interested in network analysis back. So that's why there is no disconnection. But it's quite interesting. Or, for example, we found that there is a journal, Physical Review E, which has only some physics, which doesn't have a structure, doesn't have any set of other physical journals. So it's exactly in physics, but it is connected only with journals from social sciences and engineering, something like this. So it doesn't have any other physical journal. So you can find something interesting in such case if you look at this like in this skeleton, as Vlado has just said. So it is seen better that these hierarchical structures. And my suggestion was also that you can probably cut your data into some data periods and to see how the structures were changing, because now you see, I'm really sorry because of this noise. This is because of Mark. But the idea is that you might have cut your data into some periods, and then to see that your like collaboration structures or this citation between the journals can also change during the time, because now you see, you look at it as a snapshot of all the data all together. And using this approach, block modeling, it's really interesting to see how the structure was changing through time. You can probably look at some of the papers by Anushka and Vlado and to see some examples of how it can be done, and then probably to get an idea how you can do it with your data. So something like this.
Yeah, thank you, Daria. Well, I really like the idea about this hierarchy of journals. When I have studied, we have looked at different features of journals. What journals are they teacher education? Are they about education itself, or are they just in mathematics? Let's say yes. I have this data. I mean, I just look at manually, but but I like this. You say why one journals don't cite the other journals. It's I suppose on the one side pure scientific reason. I suppose what you have announced that one are methodological journals, basic, and the other not. And but on the other side, I suppose it is what we have now, this challenging between journals. In every journals would like to be recognized, and that's why they cite Q1 journals, let's say, and so on. Well, but I suppose it's really interesting, but I suppose it's just separate research line, and but we have noticed that it can be also studied. Well, regarding the periods, we have faced some limitations. It's also my supervisor also advised to look at, and we and I have also looked this, but I looked this topical evolutions through periods, but we failed because until till 90s it was really not so much represented. Unfortunately, we have from in the last half of century. Of previous century, we have maybe from 200 to 300 articles per year, and starting with 50 articles annually. That's why it was not so much representative, but I noticed some features, but it was not representative. We decided just to look in general. And the other thing that only US and UK articles were indexed in this time, in the previous time. That's why we could see only from the end of 90s. But block modeling, it's my next step. I understand it to really study and try to apply it. Thank you.
I didn't hear how did you determine the keywords because I was too late and because maybe if you are using also abstracts and you take keywords also from abstracts, you can get also enough data also in the earlier years.
We have this how to say search query. Yes, we just take the most representative keywords, and we search in titles and keywords, not in abstracts. And regarding abstracts, I noticed that I suppose only in from the middle of 1990s, these abstracts appear on the regular basis, and before also this metadata miss abstracts, unfortunately. Yeah, it was also good source of study. Thank you, Vladimir. Well, seems that there is no question. Thank you for so much for the discussion, and I'm really here just in new role and in new community of data scientists, and thank you so much for inviting again in discussion, and we'll keep informed about my progress.
Yeah, Denis, thank you very much for joining us today. And you can always rely on our methodological help. We will be happy to see your progress as well. So, yeah,
thank you.
Let's keep going together.
Thank you. Well, I would be glad also for the recordings, because I need to the suggestions once again.
Okay, so now probably we can stop the recording.